On a beautiful run through the park on a pleasant day, you can easily get lost.
No! She didn't kill him.
Huh? In your true crime podcast.
It was the pool guy. So obvious.
Whatever motivates you works for us. It's all about letting your run be your run. And Brooks is here for every runner, doing the research and sweating the details to create gear that works for you. It's your run. Brooks, run happy.
This episode is brought to you by Smart Food. What makes Smart Food so smart? It's Air Pop Popcorn, tossed in white cheddar cheese, only 70 calories per cup. A notorious black bag of popcorn deliciousness. You are what you eat. Welcome to the Smart Club. Shop now at snacks.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a post-game edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. I'm Dan Labbe, joined by Kay Cabot and Ashley Bastock. It is Saturday, Christmas Eve. I just have to say that because I have to keep reminding myself that it's actually Saturday and not Sunday. It was, of course, a full day of football across the league, and the Browns and the Saints played today. 17-10, the New Orleans Saints win. The headline there is that the Browns are now officially eliminated from playoff contention. They cannot have a winning season. So I guess let's just do it this way. Mary Kay, give us a takeaway. Let's kind of go around here and do some takeaways from this game today for the next 15 or so minutes.
You know what? Really, I think that they tried to emphasize the passing game on a day when it just wasn't going to be there. And I think, people might look at this game and be worried about, Deshaun Watson and his receivers. I think it was the weather. I think the conditions just were not conducive to 31 passes and these guys trying to execute an efficient passing game. I mean, Deshaun Watson, at times he sailed his throws. He was very off. He did go ice cold in the second half in a lot of ways. He completed only 9 of 18 in the second half, and his rating was like 31 in the second half. But he didn't get any help from his receivers. He had 2 drops on that final drive. He had in the second half, David Bell dropped a pass that was then picked off. It went off his hands and was picked off. So he just didn't have the help that he needed, but this just probably wasn't the day to try to throw the ball as much as they did. They probably should have just torn a page out of the Saints playbook and just tried to pound that ball. And if they had to use more running backs to do it, if they had to use Dearness Johnson to do it, if they had to use some Jerome Ford to do it, then they should have done it. But the passing game just wasn't all there tonight.
Yeah, Ashley, I mean, I'm sitting here on this booth here at FirstEnergy Stadium, and it's cold, and the wind is like rattling the windows. And this is like hours after the game was over. You and I have both tracked down the hot chocolate Keurigs and had to hit those up because of the weather. Like, I know Twitter was, as it tends to do, it was lighting up with the, hey, why aren't the Browns running the ball argument? But it kind of felt legitimate today. It felt like there were times when maybe they could have leaned on this running game and this offensive line a little more.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, again, I get why there are certain times where there are game plans, and I know we've said we maybe wish the Browns would do this some more, where you give an opposing team what they're not expecting. And to me, it felt like the Browns were trying to do that. And on our video, I used the example of, it's basically like what Mike McDaniel did to the Browns when they played the Dolphins, right? Like, you expect them to have this really like pass heavy offense and they come out and they run the ball. Like, to me, the Browns, it felt like, hey, everyone's expecting us to run the ball because, I don't know, we have one of the best running backs in the league. We have, one of the best backup running backs in the league. We have one of the best run blocking offensive lines in the league. And the weather is garbage outside. So it felt like they were maybe trying to pass it more. And I don't know. I'm with you. I don't think that was the right move for this offense. I get you're trying to get Deshaun Watson acclimated, and I thought the weather didn't bother him as much as I expected it to, which is good. But I just don't know that this was the game to do that. Because, I mean, we came into this game, what were we saying? Like, we're not going to really be able to learn anything about this offense or these teams from this game because the weather is going to seriously impact things. And I think we saw that play out.
Yeah, and Mary Kay, this just raises another question, I guess. I guess today's game feeds into sort of this narrative that has developed about Kevin Stefanski. And look, he's not going anywhere. no one here is going to call for him to go anywhere, I don't think. But there is the play calling side of this. And we've mentioned this, like this organization needs to evaluate every single piece of this. And that includes, do you have the right play caller? And I think at times it's looked really good with Kevin and Deshaun. But a game like this where, I did think Deshaun looked good and I thought Kevin did dial up some good things for him. Just the rest of it was a little wonky, I guess. And that's what this team has to evaluate.
Yeah, a deep pass on 4th and 2 at the end of the game when, you really needed to try to convert that and possess the ball. That was a very low percentage play. That was to DPJ. That sailed on Deshaun Watson. So there were some curious things that happened in the game. And when you have Nick Chubb, now Kareem Hunt wasn't making much hay tonight. So, I'm sure they felt like they just couldn't keep riding the Nick Chubb horse every single play, but they do have other backs that they could have put in there, right? I mean, can't you try a little bit of Dearness? He's made yards before. Can't you try some Jerome Ford if Kareem Hunt's not getting the job done? Maybe a little bit more Deshaun running the ball here and there, right? I mean, the Saints just came in and had a better game plan. Once they figured out that Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara were going to be the way to go, they just rode those guys to victory. They scored 17 straight points. They took it to the Browns. They imposed their will, and they just did the right thing for these conditions. Not only was it freezing cold and really super crazy windy, but curiously, and I still really can't quite figure out why this happened, but the field was very snowy and slick, even though they had the tarp on it. It just didn't work out the way that they planned. Somehow that didn't go right. I don't know exactly what happened, but I just don't think the field should have been like that. Amari Cooper dropped a pass in the back of the end zone because he completely slipped on a snowy area, and it hasn't snowed since last night. So I don't know. I'd be very curious to find out why that looked like that.
Okay, Ashley, what's your takeaway?
I think for me, and I wrote about this, it's kind of like this was the most fitting way for their playoff hopes and, as a result, their season to effectively end for me. Like to just sputter out against the Saints in a nothing game in bad weather on Christmas Eve, because this season has felt so inconsistent in so many ways. At times, to me, it felt like their identity was waiting for Deshaun Watson to come back. And I feel like, from the beginning, it was kind of clear, like, hey, Deshaun's not going to fix all these problems. Like, him coming back isn't going to fix these communication breakdowns in the secondary or the fact that your defensive front can't really handle any kind of steady rushing attack right now. And for me, it just kind of is a fitting way for this season to go out, because for so much of the season, it felt like, hey, we're waiting for Deshaun Watson and this season will be what it is because he's gone for 11 games, but we still have 2023 and now they have 2023 because this season is done. So it just felt like kind of what I expected to happen in a weird way, even though I think they're a better team than the Saints.
Yeah, I think that's one of the frustrating things, Mary Kay, is they are better than the Saints. And we all picked the Browns to win this game, and I don't think we were wrong to make those picks. I don't think those were homer picks. They're better than the Saints, but they lost to them, and that just sort of sums up a lot of this season. They've played teams that they are better than, or they should be better than, and they lost to those teams. And in the end, it ends up costing them.
It really did end up costing them. I mean, you can't let the Saints come into Cleveland Browns. You can't let them come into FirstEnergy Stadium and run the right game plan and rush for 172 yards or whatever it was that they rushed for. You can't let them take over the game, impose their will, score 17 straight points like that when this is the kind of the game that the Browns are supposed to be able to handle. I mean, and it looked like they were going to in the beginning. They were out to a 10-0 lead. Then they led 10-3 at the half. But you could just feel the momentum shifting when the Saints realized, hey, let's run Taysom Hill more. Let's take advantage of him. Let's platoon him with Andy Dalton and get him rolling downhill in this crazy weather. So, you can't let a team come in and do that. I mean, these are things they're going to have to really look at in the offseason is, do they do the right things in the right situations? And today, it felt a little bit off at times.
The Browns are the only AFC North team. The AFC North played the NFC South. So officially today, it becomes the Browns are the only AFC North team to have lost a game to an NFC South opponent this season. They lost to Atlanta, and of course they lose this game to the Saints. Okay, Mary Kay, I know you've got to go and start writing here, so I want to get this topic out here before you do that. Deshaun Watson. So there's this weird thing these last few weeks where I'm watching Deshaun Watson, and then I look at his stats, and like today, he was 15 of 31, 135, threw an interception, a 47-1 rating. I still feel like I watched Deshaun Watson today, and I continue to see this progress. I continue to see these steps forward from him. And, on top of that, he threw 2 pretty nice footballs at the end of that game that should have tied the game up. On a day when everything was a struggle, he still led this team down the field and made 2 throws, one of which at least should have ended up in a touchdown. So I thought even though the numbers weren't there, I thought this was another test passed for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, especially in these kind of conditions. Now, they asked him to throw too much, but he did a nice job, and he did what he needed to do at the end. Now, once again, 10 points isn't enough, and they stalled out a lot, and they didn't handle the conditions properly. But, in the end, when he had to try to take the team down and do his job, I think he did his job at the end, and he did not get help from his receivers. He did not get help from DPJ there, and he didn't get help from David Njoku there, who dropped the ball, and he apologized to Deshaun Watson. But once again, I think you can see the flashes. You can see that he's going to be amazing for this football team. There aren't going to be very many games like this, but he is going to have to make sure that he can function well in a game like this, and they're going to have to make sure that they can call a game for him in these kinds of conditions, because even if it's not this bad, you're still going to have 2 or 3 games a year, something like this. So that's going to be an issue going forward. But for the most part, I think he demonstrated that he is everything he's cracked up to be. And, even Amari Cooper talked about it after the game. He thinks those 2 are going to be dynamite together. I agree. And same thing with David Njoku and some of the others.
Okay, Mary Kay, we're going to let you go. Ashley and I are going to stick around for a few more minutes here, but we're going to take a break here on the Orange and Brown Talk Postgame podcast.
High fees and a low rate. That's what your big bank offers for your business savings. It's time to bring your business to Live Oak Bank. Convenient digital access, superior customer support, no maintenance fees, and one of the best interest rates in the country. To open your account at Live Oak Bank and start growing your business savings today, go to liveoakbank.com/Spotify. That's liveoakbank.com/Spotify.
And welcome back to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Okay, Ashley, we were talking about Deshaun Watson. What did you think of him today?
Yeah, again, I said it off the top here, but I was kind of surprised the weather didn't impact him more, right? Because the only time we've seen him play in really bad weather here was against the Browns when he was still playing with the Texans in 2020. So I was kind of surprised. Again, the weather did impact things, right? There were multiple throws where we were like, oh my gosh, you can really just see the ball kind of sputtering. There was one throw where it was almost like end over end. But at the end of the day, the misses were by a lot of his pass catchers. Of course, the most notable was the David Njoku drop, right at the goal line. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think, was maybe, it looked like, a bit more concerned with his feet, considering he was in the left back corner of the end zone on that last drive. But there was a point on that last Browns drive where I'm sitting there, I'm writing my story. It was the story I ended up publishing after the game. And I'm like, am I going to have to rethink my entire angle because it's Deshaun Watson about to finish a game-winning drive? And I think he did enough to finish that drive. It was the other parts of the offense that kind of sputtered out at the end there. But I was just overall, I think, kind of pleasantly surprised with the way he played that second quarter drive where the Browns got their touchdown, and I know you said it too. I think maybe the best offensive drive by the Browns with Deshaun Watson out there. They relied on Nick Chubb a lot. He made some throws. So overall, I think I was just kind of felt yeah, okay, he did enough. He did okay. He did better than I thought he would in this weather.
Yeah, and I thought the one that ended with the Cooper drop It ended up in a field goal too. That one was. I liked that drive because they faced some adversity. They had a penalty. They had back-to-back penalties that put them in 3rd and 16 and then 3rd and 11 because a big game by Kareem Hunt got erased on one of those penalties. So then Nick Chubb gets him a big run, but then Watson converted a third down to Cooper for 14. That's the one you're talking about, right?
That was the drive I was talking about.
Okay, so it was a field goal drive.
Yes, the field goal drive.
Yeah, and then the 3rd and 10 to Michael Woods, and then that was a really good throw to Amari Cooper. He just fell. That was, I think, the best that was the best we've seen of Kevin and Deshaun. I think that's sort of what you want to see, a good mix, and then those guys, when they're backed up against the wall, they make a play.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's kind of what you need, right? You need this marriage between the pass game and the run game, and we kind of got it. I thought it was so important that they ate up a lot of time in that drive, and I thought, like, looking at that drive as it was happening, they go up 10-0, the weather is what it is. I'm thinking, like, oh, this is, like, going to be the drive that we're talking about mostly at the end of the game, and we're still talking about it. But in that drive, they ate up, like, over 8 minutes and 44 seconds. Like, I really thought that it was just perfect and a perfect mixture. And Deshaun got to, get some of those completions in too. But overall, yeah, I'm like, I don't know. It's just like, to me, when I look back on this game, I'm going to be like, Deshaun Watson playing in cold weather wasn't a problem here. And I feel like he did legitimately take another step forward, which, now let's be real. These last 2 games for me, really all that it's about is, what does Deshaun Watson need in 2023?
Okay, here's a thought exercise.
Oh, boy.
Because we got nothing else. David Njoku catches that ball, scores a touchdown. The Browns go for 2. Deshaun Watson runs it in. What are we saying about Deshaun?
We're going to say that's the wow play we needed, right? Like, we talked about wow plays on this preview podcast. I think that's what we're saying. Like, oh man, Deshaun Watson is unstoppable. Like, first of all, like, I don't know if we are saying it, but I think like Twitter is going nuts talking about how Deshaun Watson is unstoppable. He feeds off cold weather. He's perfect for Cleveland, blah, blah, blah. Like, nothing but overreactions. Kind of like, I think there's, let's be real, there's some overreactions to this loss, I think. But I think that would be like that would have been the perfect scenario for Deshaun Watson. Like, you lead a game-winning drive in this brutal weather, and the Browns go for the win and get it instead of going for the tie. Like, I think we would have absolutely loved that if they got it done.
I wish we could have seen if he was going to go for the win there. I bet he would have because of the weather and all.
I think so, too. Yeah. You want to end it.
I didn't look to see if he got asked about that. I don't think he did, but Kevin, I mean.
I'll look quick while you talk.
There you go.
Ramp us up.
Yeah, I mean, I just think if he scores on that, we're talking about, oh, look, Deshaun, was up and down and fighting with the weather, but then when it mattered most, he made these great throws, one to Donovan Peoples-Jones, one to David Njoku, whoever would have scored that, and then he makes the play on the 2-point try. That would have been really fun to hear that conversation, I think. That we would have had about Deshaun Watson. And you're right, there would have been a lot of overreaction and a lot of hyperbole. But that's what happens when you have a franchise quarterback with this much talent.
And he did not get asked about it, to answer your question. Kevin Stefanski did not get asked, which is not surprising because he's not a coach who seems very receptive to dealing in hypotheticals.
That is true. I don't think he would answer that question, so it probably doesn't matter. Okay, this is going to be a quick post-game pod. So just one more thing here before we get out of here. 2 games left, 1 at Washington, 1 at Pittsburgh. They obviously don't carry any meaning. The Commanders, I believe, still in the playoff race. The Steelers, I guess if the Browns are eliminated, the Steelers are probably eliminated. But it's not going to mean much. What do you watch for besides Deshaun Watson? I know you said earlier that's obviously kind of the big thing. Is there something else that you're like, this is what I'm looking for in these last 2 games? Or is it just Deshaun?
Well, for me, it's like, it's not only Deshaun, it's more about like, what does Deshaun Watson need around him in terms of play calling and personnel. But hey, since Mary Kay's gone, I'm going to say what she talked about in the video because it's a great point. It's like looking at a lot of your younger guys on both sides of the ball because, again, I think especially on defense, they just assumed these younger guys were developed. and they clearly weren't. Like that was where a lot of your issues were. And I think it would be a mistake to go into 2023 still maybe over-relying on some of these young guys or falling into that trap again, right? And like say, we use this example on the preview pod, like over-relying on a guy like Alex Wright, who I don't think you can use like in place of a Jadeveon Clowney. But I think overall it's like getting a bigger picture, especially of, hey, what the heck just went wrong on our defense for the last, for the second straight year? And did we over-rely on some of these younger guys, and how can we fix that?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. And by the way, the Steelers, as we're recording this, they haven't even played yet. So I guess they're not eliminated. They could get to 7-8. I don't know. Again, I've said this before. I'm not a math guy. So, I think it's just like, God, I don't even know. I think it really is a lot of Deshaun Watson. And I think you just kind of took the other big thing is like just trying to do full evaluations and get an idea of how some of these young guys fit, but also understanding as much as I like Alex Wright and am intrigued by Alex Wright, and I think you're the same way, I don't want Alex Wright to be the defensive end 2 next year. Now if he shows up in camp and his hair's on fire and he wins that job, awesome, go for it. But I don't want him to be the only guy there. And it's just sort of across the board. I could point to some areas where that would concern me.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like with the whole defensive tackle situation, right? Like we heard all summer that Jordan Elliott was like a changed guy and totally different. And oh my God, like we basically heard that he's come into camp with his hair on fire. And we just didn't really see that production. Now he got a couple of sacks, like he made a couple of highlight plays. He made one last week on special teams, blocking that Justin Tucker field goal. But I do think there are just guys throughout this defense where like, okay, you tried that. And again, I'm like on record now where I get the analytical approach. And I think I was one of the people that praised it about not spending money in certain areas on this defense. But at the end of the day, for me, when you talk about bigger picture of this game, if you can find one, like this team got run over too many times to count, like literally run over, especially by teams, not this one, that have really good passing offenses. But the Saints eventually, like, again, I think the Browns are a better team than the Saints, but even they came out in the second half and you're like, you know what? Why don't we just run Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill as much as possible? And it worked. And like, yeah, they didn't like, I think they combined for 152 yards. So like, it wasn't like Austin Eckler going off on them earlier this season, but it was still bad. Like they couldn't stop that. It felt like there were guys just getting their work. Taysom Hill literally dragged guys into the end zone on his touchdown. It's a problem.
Yes, absolutely. One more quick bonus topic. I feel like Doug here. I'm just keeping you here forever.
I know. It's okay.
One quick bonus topic. Jack Conklin, because I don't know when we're really going to get into this. Signing that extension, you and I both tweeted about it yesterday. I know some fans were a little skeptical. I think it's the right thing to do. It gives you stability. I think he's going to be better in year 2 from the injury. I think the Browns did the right thing locking him up.
Me too. And I get it. Like people are frustrated, I think, with a little bit with how Jack's performed this year. And especially like his run blocking grade is like by far the lowest of his career right now. But what I keep saying is like, it is wild that he came back from major reconstructive surgery as quickly as he did. And then like, I think when he came back, I'm like, I don't know, is he going to just kind of have another 2021 where he's just like hampered by injuries and they're like piling up because he's overcompensating, and that really hasn't happened. But like it's still, to me, like I think for him to be another year removed from that surgery, I think you're going to get him back to form. And I think it's just like really rare. Maybe this is an off-season story because I don't know how long the research will take, but like to keep the core of an offensive line group together this long is just like wild to me. Like you basically have only lost JC Treader from the last like going into 2023, it'll be like 4 seasons with this group, basically, right? 4 or 5 seasons with this group. Jack got here in 2020, I think, right?
Yeah. He was. Yeah,
and Jed got here in 2020. Jed was drafted in 2020. So like 4 years together with this group with the best offensive line coach in football is kind of wild to me. So that's the other reason I personally like this extension, that you have those 3 of those guys now like locked up for a while.
And they're going to have other needs. We've discussed those other needs on other pods. To not have to worry about going and finding the right tackle now, I just think it matters, especially because I think you still need to see more from Jed Wills on the left side. Okay, that'll do it for this post-game edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If this wasn't enough for you, go find our pod from Friday. If you haven't listened to it yet, we did a big roundtable. It wasn't really a game preview until the end, so give that a listen if you haven't given that a listen yet. See how many times I can say that. And then also become a Football Insider subscriber, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.